Hey, thanks for joining me for this conversion coaching session for Leadpages. My name is Bob Sparkins, and this is an under the hood training where we do a bit of an interactive Leadpages tutorial to get you more confident using the Leadpages drag and drop builder. This session is all about optimizing your layout, and I'm going to be giving you a few mini lessons today so that you can discover the settings and the strategies to really increase those conversions with your Leadpages account. Now, as we go through this process today, I'm going to be teaching you a bit about how you can increase those conversions with better layouts. And obviously, you're working with some templates, so a lot of the heavy lifting has been done for you. However, I know that you, like many other people, will want to customize some things and really put your own personal touch on it. So I want to give you some ideas on how to do that while staying true to the essence of the templates that you're working with. I also want to help you to discover some of those hidden layout features that maybe you haven't discovered just quite yet on your own. Some of them, again, are not super necessary, but those of you that like to go a little bit above and beyond to tweak things, I'll show you where they are. And I also want to make sure that you know how to optimize your experience for the visitors that are coming to your pages based on what devices they are using, because that's a really critical component of marketing for conversion. So let's get into layout optimization. So the first thing I want you to think about is how can you think more like a conversion designer? So we take the position here at Leadpages that you're really good at what you do, serving your clients, helping them transform their lives, et cetera, but you likely never took a formal marketing training, and you certainly likely didn't take any design classes. And so we've built our templates to shortcut your pathway to success. And if you're going to make changes to those templates, we want you to be thinking like a conversion designer, not just somebody who's going to make your page look awesome, but will it actually convert? That's what we really want you to do with the platform, is we want you to generate more leads, we want you to get more clients, and we want you to spend a lot less time creating these pages than you might otherwise do on your own or working with a developer, designer, or the expense that would have. So those three quick things mindset-wise that I want you to be thinking about. So the first thing is you should be utilizing white space to create an inviting page that doesn't overwhelm your visitor. So when I see those landing page reviews come in, a lot of times the biggest mistake I see is people will convert a template into something that's unrecognizable to the original essence of that template. And they usually do so by stuffing the page with too much stuff. Then everything's crammed together. The colors are out of whack, a lot of different fonts being used, et cetera. And so I want you to be careful about how you take the page, and you can add your own touch to it, but don't do so at the expense of the feeling that the visitor is going to have that makes them feel stressful. Okay, we want to have a page that relieves the stress for people. It has some tension, right? It has this idea of forward momentum in their life, but it shouldn't feel like they want to turn it off immediately. And white space allows you to do that. So as you can see, even from this slide, there's a lot of different elements on the page, but they're all spaced out in a way that makes it inviting, makes it easy for you to consume. The second thing I want you to be thinking about as a conversion first designer is that the people coming to your page will be using a phone, or they'll be using a desktop or a tablet, and you don't know which one they're going to come in on. Obviously, statistically, the likelihood is people will be using their mobile device to look at your page. Over half of the traffic that most people's websites get are on mobile devices. If your traffic is coming primarily from social media, that's going to be even higher. So I want you to be thinking about the different devices people could be using and have that mobile first mentality, and certainly a mobile consideration whenever you're designing your pages. The initial look and feel of the pages you have for templates, they are going to be desktop focused, but mobile responsive. There is a thing that we can do to make sure that they are even better looking on mobile devices. The third thing I want you to be thinking about as a conversion first designer is I want you to reduce the friction on the page for making the action happen. When the person comes to this page, you want them to move forward by giving you their email address or to buy from you for the product or service that you're offering. So you want to make it easy for people to do that. So making sure you have good call to action buttons that are standing out are going to be important, and also including them in a few different parts of your page will be important too. All right. So for the rest of this training, I want to break down a few little mini lessons of how to do these things, how to think like a conversion designer, but to do so within the Leadpages platform. So let's start out first with the basics of layout in Leadpages. So what does that really mean? What are the fundamentals of the drag and drop builder? So as I go through this process, I'm going to be doing so by utilizing the actual builder, right? So we're going to take a moment to go through, look at a page, see how it's pulled together, see what the kind of construction of the pages are, and then make sure that you know how to utilize them. Okay, so let's do so by jumping into the builder. So this is the landing page builder. The website builder is very, very similar. The only difference is that you have more pages to work with, but the essence of what you see in this drag and drop area, that's going to be the same. Okay, so the first thing to note for the basics of the layout for Leadpages is that all of our pages and websites are constructed in the combination of sections, and then each section is comprised of at least one row, and each row is comprised of one or more columns. Okay, so your structure of the page is vertical, top to bottom, right? And it's also, when you go to the mobile device, it's going to be from whatever was left to right is going to be top to bottom. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what I mean by that, and we'll get more into the mobile responsiveness in a little bit, but if you preview the page that you're working on, you'll be able to see that there's sections, and then there's the rows, and then there's the columns that are pulled together nicely when you put your page together, right? But you can look at it on the tablet as a preview and see how the same content comes in. And then on a mobile device, you can do the same, right? And so as you can see, when you're working with a mobile device, the basics of that concept of section, rows, and columns, everything is vertical, stacking on top. But when you're working on the desktop, you have columns that go across first, and then you would go down. So I just wanted to start out with that fundamental basics of how the builder works. I also want you to know that over here on the left side, there is a title for each of these sections, and the template designer will have put in a default text item for describing what that is. You can change that, and I would encourage you to do so, especially with these lower sections. And you can do so not just with the section title, but you can also do it within the rows and the columns. Now, you don't have to do this, but the nice thing about doing this is if you later on are using the different sections as anchor points for clicking to a part of your page, or you're using a countdown timer in order to reveal a section on a page after a certain amount of time, or hide a section, how you name these sections can be important to you. So feel free to click on this little pencil icon and name it something else. In this case, for example, we might have like main content or something like that. Doesn't matter within the rows what you name it. Nobody really sees that except for you. But the sections themselves, they do make a difference. So we might call this hero, for example, and click on save. So a couple quick little fundamental basics about how the Leadpages builder is constructed. So the next idea that I want to do a quick mini lesson on is the reordering of those sections, rows, and columns so that you can move the content that you have within the page that you're working from. Okay, so this is important because you might be constructing your page in such a way that after a little while, you might be testing, you might be doing other things to the page, and you're going to say to yourself, you know what, I actually want to move things around, and you're going to want to make sure that you know how to do that. So in the left side of this layout panel, you're going to see that within sections and rows and columns, that there's this little set of dots. And so if you want to move a section up or down, all you need to do is click on the dots, drag it up or down, and you can see how the name of the section will switch to wherever you're moving it to. So if you want this about section to be at the top of the page, you can move it to the top of the page simply by moving this section up. There is no place on the page itself for you to move a section. Okay, so the drag and drop is using these dots on the left. Now, if you make a mistake or you want to change back to what it was, you can always click on the undo button. Now, within the individual rows, you can also move those around. So if you want to switch the features, you can do so. If you want to switch a column within each of these areas, you can certainly do so. And I also want you to know that you can take a row and move it from one section to the next. So if you have a feature row, for example, and you want to put it into this section, you can simply click on it from one row and bring it down to the next. Now, doing so may not make a lot of sense for you at that particular time, but I wanted you to see how you can move things around really easily using the drag and drop builder, but in that layout panel pane. All right. So be thoughtful about where the different sections are. Feel free to move them as you need to. And if you need to kind of revert back to the way things were, you can either click undo, or after you've saved the page the first time, if you've made some additional changes, you can always revert to the most recent save. Okay. So that's how you manipulate where things are on the page. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with you is the idea of some section creation shortcuts. All right. So the idea behind this is I want you to not have to spend a lot of time dealing with the things that are really important for you. Okay. So what do I mean by that? I mean, as you're making your pages, you want to make sure that you're able to do so in a very rapid way. All right. So with section creation shortcuts, I want to reduce that publishing time with you so that you can either use the section templates that we have, or you can copy and paste from the different sections that are available in different pages. Okay. So let me break that down and show you what I mean about that. Okay. All right. So over inside of the builder again, we're going to come in, and within the individual panel of the settings, you have a section setting over here on the left. And so if you want to utilize a previously created section template, which shortcuts the layout, the padding, the margin, where the images are, all that kind of stuff, you can do so by choosing from a number of different categories of section templates. So the About section templates include a headline, an image, and text, and a call to action button. And then you can see that the layout's a little bit different for each version. And you can also see that some of them include a darker background and some of them are a lighter background. In the call to action area, this is more for that hero, middle, or bottom of your page. All you're dealing with is a good headline, maybe a subheadline above it, and a CTA button, a call to action button. Contact Us includes a form with the opportunity for people to fill that out. Of course, we also recommend pop-ups for filling out information. But if you're working with a website, for example, and you want to have a Contact Us page, sometimes it's nice for you to have the page already done. So as you see going through here, these are preset section designs that allow you to have a preset set of rows and columns. You can see sometimes the spacing is between the columns where there's a gap. This is all giving you just, again, a shortcut on what you can do and how quickly you can put them into action. Of course, these are named in such a way that they are dedicated for a particular purpose that the designers had in mind. You can, of course, use them in a more creative way if you'd like to. So even though these are testimonials, you could take this section here, for example, and by the way, all you need to do is click and then drag where you want this to be on the page. You could put this and create it as like a module for a course, okay? You could say that instead of this being a testimonial, this could be a graphic of the module I'm going to teach for module 1, and then you describe it, and what you're really leaning into as a section template is this idea of rows that have a background color and a gap between each row. So don't feel like you have to use them for the purposes that they are originally designed. You can be more creative with it. All right, so just showing you a couple of additional section templates just to give you this idea of exploring how these are pre-made for you, and they allow for you just to take a lot less time to move forward. This is a good one for features and benefits of particular programs. And again, every layout that we have tends to have a white, dark, or gray background to it. And if you really want to go crazy with your design and layout, you can start with a blank template instead, but it still has some structure to it. So as you bring it onto the page, you automatically have 2 rows, 1 full width row, and 2 columns on that second row if you wish to have it. All right. So that's how you work with section templates. Okay. Now, if you want to work with a page that is a separate landing page entirely, and you want to bring a section from one template into this template, all you have to do is open it up in a separate window in the builder. And you could say, you know what, I really love the way that this hero section pulls in, or even just the footer, like having the social widget already there. Or I like the layout of this particular section with the spacing and everything else. Whatever it is, all you need to do is click on the dots of the section, click on copy, and then come over to the page that you're working on and find the section where you want this to be. Click on the dots and paste above or below, and that section automatically comes over. Now, when the section comes over, it's going to default to the text styles that you have in the styles pane, which we'll talk about more in a different session than today. So if you want to change the look and feel of these sections, realize that they will be done based on the section styles. And then, of course, you can do the unique elements if you wish to. All right. So that's just a couple of quick shortcuts to working with templates and sections. Of course, within a section or within a page itself, if you have a section that you want to duplicate, you can always click on the duplicate button, and the section that you're working on, in this case, this video section, you can duplicate it, and then you'll have a video and then a video copy. Of course, you'll want to rename those as you need to, but that allows you to manipulate a section you've already worked with, make a copy of it so that you can cut down on some time. And if you did something like that, one of the things that we'd recommend, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is you might come into the section that you just copied and take a row and maybe flip the columns that you worked with so that it could stagger what's going on with your layout. Okay, so just a couple of quick ideas on how you can work with creating your custom templates, customizing your templates rather, and working with some pre-existing content. That way you have that shortcut to working with what you want to work with. All right, next up, we're going to talk about section and column spacing. So I want to make sure that you understand how padding and margins work within Leadpages, because this is one of those things that's going to quickly make your page feel a lot more open, a lot more liberated, if you will, much more breathing space when you do this properly. Okay, so in order for you to do that, what I want you to be focused on, let's get back to the page we are working on here for just a moment. So let's get rid of a couple of the things that I had worked on here and get back to the original version of the page. So what we're going to work on here is the section and column padding. So within the layout, you have this idea of the sections, right? So here's our hero section, and the section has a gear icon, like all different elements of this page. Whenever you click on the gear icon, it's going to open up settings, right? And within the settings, you're going to see within a section the ability to adjust padding. So padding is what is the space between the outer rim of the thing that you're working on, in this case, a section, and what's inside. Okay. So actually, I think it'll make a little bit more sense if I work with this section settings instead. So as you can see, the padding is 7, top and bottom, and left and right 6. Now, these do not correspond directly to some unit of measure that you need to worry about. It's just a scale of 1 to 10. Okay. So if we take the top, okay, the space here is what the padding is. If we reduce the padding down, it gets tighter on the top. If we reduce it on the bottom, it gets tighter, and the same thing left and right. Okay, so this allows you to have an additional amount of space happening or a reduced amount of space depending on what you're trying to do. Now, in this particular case, we have, as you can see, you can still see to the background of this page, and we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later. But this gives you that breathability if you want to increase it, if you want to make sure that the background is visible. Okay, so again, this is padding. Now, I also want you to notice that as you're working with these pages, if you want to make the content of the pages stretch out a little bit further, in the styles area, there is in the background section of your page, there is a page width option that gives you large, medium, or small. So if you really want to make your page narrow and focused, almost like an old school newsletter or sales letter, something like that, you might choose a page width of small. But choosing medium or the default in most templates is going to be large, gives you the most content visible on the page. So that's going to be a factor of how much padding is actually on the page. Most of it's going to be controlled though within the section style. But if you notice that you really want to make it even further narrow down, then you're going to want to pay attention to that. So we've got our padding. Do know that the padding that you put here is going to be reflected both on the desktop versions and on the mobile version. So if we increase the padding all the way up to 10, as an example, for this particular section, and let me make sure I'm in the right section here. So let me go back to the one I was just working on. So we have our about section, and we go to our section style. And if we increase this all the way to 10 on the top and bottom, and we do the same thing with left and right, and we really kind of squish it together. When we go to preview this on mobile, that same idea of adding additional space, top, bottom, left, right, when we go to the mobile device, it's going to make it even more within that section. Okay. So if you feel like that's too much space for the mobile devices, maybe decrease how much space you're putting into this area. Okay. Doesn't affect it too badly, but I just want you to know that it does affect it some. Okay. So my recommendation is when you're working with layout and padding, that 3 to 5 range is going to be pretty good. And most importantly, you typically want to have the top and bottom to be an equal number and the left and right to be an equal number. They don't need to be equal to each other, but these two numbers should be the same, and these two numbers should be the same if you want to have your page nice and balanced. Now that's for the sections. For the individual rows, there's no padding between the rows, but within each column there is. So when you click on the column and you click on the gear icon, you see the margin and padding for that particular section. So let me go into this features one so we can see that there's 4 columns here. So we'll go into features so you can really see how this is impacted. So here's column 2, and within column 2, you'll notice that there is a margin area, which is new, and a padding area. So the padding area, again, is within the thing that we're working on, how much space is between the border and what's inside. Okay, so to emphasize this, we're looking at this microphone section. We click on the top, and that padding pushed what's inside of this gray box down. Okay, whereas and you can do the same thing with all four settings, but the margin is what's happening outside of that container. All right, so just to make sure this is super clear, I'm going to change the color of this particular column so you can really see what we're talking about. So if you had this margin at 0 on the top, it's going to bring up the outside of what we're dealing with. And if you're dealing with the column on the right and the left, and you make this down to 0, then it's going to combine these things together. Okay. So if you noticed, this column 2, which was originally column 1, if you notice that there is a gap, it's because that there was this 1 value for each one. And a lot of times you're going to have a column that's going to be, reduced one way or the other, or it can be expanded. So if you want that breathability, you want that space, then having the margin between columns be set to 1 gives that effect for you. Okay. And if you want the margin to be more than 1, you can do so. It just adds in an additional level of flavor. But what's really cool about this, I think, is that you can manipulate this, especially like in a pricing table, to where you want to highlight something that's even more important than something else. So for example, if we took this margin for the first one and left it alone, then we came into the second one and we said, you know what, I want this one to be taller than the first one. So we're going to increase that size, and maybe we'll even change the color of that background to something that's, kind of prominent. Then on the next column, maybe we do the reverse of that. We add space on the top and bottom for the margin to reduce the size of what we're working with. And within column 4, we could do the same kind of thing. We just add in the margin, let's call it 4 and 4. And we make that even shorter. So you can make this sort of stair-stepping effect of increasing the vertical space of a particular column so that it stands out better, especially with the use of the color background. And then you can reduce how much the other areas are by increasing the margin on the outsides. And that gives you this effect that you're seeing here. So this is a little bit of that higher level layout customization that some of you may want to do, especially on those areas of your page where you want to call attention to the biggest feature that you have. And of course, if you want to change your mind as to which one is the biggest, then you can always click and drag the columns like I showed you before to make this true like stair-stepping kind of effect. Okay, so that's the way that you work with column settings for padding and margin. Again, margin is what's the space between other elements and the element you're working with, in this case, the columns. And then the padding is what's inside of those columns before the content is there, whether it's text or images or anything else. Okay, so that's how you work with that. All right, let's do the next idea here and pull up that. So the next item on our layout optimization is using the space widget so that we can balance the layout that we have both vertically and horizontally with what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so in order to do that, let's get back into the main area of our page, and we're going to take a look at how this is laid out right now. So in this hero section, for example, we have this image, and this image is currently centered in this vertical part of the column. All right. And let's say, for example, that we reduce some of this text. So it was something like this, and we didn't like how much white space was below this button. So there's a couple ways we could adjust this. So one way that I've pretty much already hinted at is within this hero section, you have this main column, and this main column has a top margin. So we just talked about how the margin can be changed to the outside of the column that we're in so that the balance is put vertically. But if you liked the way that this was and how far down it was, and you wanted to add some space on the right, then one element you can add is a widget, which is the space widget. So the space widget can come on and you can drag it to where the little blue box shows up. And this becomes now a vertical spacer. And that vertical spacer allows you to more fine tune the way that that particular section or that particular column has that white space involved. So again, this is mostly for a desktop. The space widget basically disappears on a mobile as far as trying to manipulate it too much. But on the desktop and tablet, this is going to matter to you to how balanced this can be. So working with those two ideas of margin for columns, padding perhaps, but then that white space within an individual element that can incorporate that space that you're looking for. It may also be the case that you want to put this in between a headline and the CTA button, because maybe you just want a little bit more breathability and you don't want to add more text. Okay, so that's an option that you have. Now, another thing that you can do is you might say, you know what, I have a button like this, join my free class, and I want that button to be a full width button, but not take up the full width of the column it's in. So you can use that same space widget, and you can either duplicate it and have a second one or drag another one onto the page. But regardless, you can put it on the side of the button. And then you can use these handlebars to drag the shape or the size of that space widget to a level that is more appropriate for you. So sometimes you're going to be working with a button that you want it not to be full width, which means the width of the button will basically be how much text is inside the button and no more than that. And of course, you can add in like a space or two on either side, and that can do whatever you want it to do. Okay. But what I would recommend, and what's a finer way of using the Leadpages builder to make the button bigger but not super huge, is go ahead and let this be full width, but then utilize a space widget that allows you to have the left and right movement to adjust exactly how wide you want that button to be. Okay, so the space widget allows you to change the vertical spacing within one column, or it can add some space to the left or right of a particular button. And of course, you can have more than one of these. So if you wanted to have a button on either side, you can do so. This is especially the case when you're working with video, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in this session, of having a space widget on either side if you wanted to utilize that particular feature. Next up, let's talk about device-specific display. So I gave you this concept already that your landing pages and websites are going to look a little differently on different types of devices based on whatever the viewer is using, right? And so the idea is that you can control which one people are seeing. So let's dig into that. All right. So inside of the builder, what we're going to do is we're going to come into the layout pane and we're going to come to a section that we think is going to look a little different on the different devices, right? So the best way to think about this is let's go to the preview and then let's look at the mobile version of the page and see which section might not be the way we want it to be. Again, every section is going to come in as a mobile responsive section. So you don't have to worry about people pinching and zooming in order to see what they want to see on the page. Okay. But as we scroll down, you might see that there's a section that you really don't like the way it's coming in. And so this one actually looks pretty good for each one. But let's say, for example, that you notice that this section doesn't look super good with the background because I can't really see the background. Okay. So that's the section that says I've been there. So in that I've been there section right now, we've got basically what's called a transparent background image. Okay. So there's a color, solid color, and you could choose white or whatever. And then you go into add and you reduce this down to 0. And that is what's making this background clear. All right. Or transparent. If you wanted to have a color and make it 40% opaque so that it just changes the effectiveness of the, makes a tone, you could of course do that. But in this particular case, what I'm thinking about is that for the mobile section, I can't really see the background, so why include it? So what you would do is you would name this section about, like you've already done, but you're going to add in about for desktop. So you can call it DT or desktop or whatever, or just D if you want. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be visible to most people. But then you make a copy of it, and you're going to call this one about mobile. And this is just for your benefit, right? So what you name it is completely up to you. But within the section settings, you have a setting called device specific display where you can hide on desktop, hide on tablet, or hide on mobile. So this is the desktop version, right? This is what we were calling this, about desktop. So we're going to hide this on mobile. And then we're going to come back to the about mobile, and we're going to hide this one on desktop and tablet so that it's only visible on the mobile devices. Once we've done that, then we can come back into the layout and we leave the desktop one alone because we like the way that it looks. But then for this one, we just might come into the section settings and we're going to make the background have a solid color. So we don't see that background at all. All right. Or maybe we make it a different border of a color, but it's not got that, it doesn't have that weird motif of linear designs and graphical shapes and stuff like that. You can also use a color similar to whatever the original version is, or come up with what that's going to be for you. Okay. So you can obviously play with this as you wish to get the effect that you're trying to go for. But that way you have two different versions of your section. One section is visible on desktop and is optimized for that. And the other section is visible on mobile and is optimized for that. And then from that perspective, you can do a couple things. So this is now a mobile first thing. As you have heard from me earlier in this session, when things go from desktop to mobile, the left to right then becomes top to bottom. And so if you want this image to be a different image entirely, or you want it to be in a different order, you might choose to do so. So let's say that we want this image to be a little bit thinner. So we're going to set the max image width to say 250. And then let's bring this image to be below the first set of text. And then maybe we want the button to be underneath of that. And then let's make this button. Let's let this be left justified image like so. This allows us to have the text and the images in the button to be in a different order that might be more compelling for that particular page on mobile versus on desktop. So you have your desktop version as we preview this. You have your desktop version where the layout is designed for the text to flow in a particular way, right? So we go to that about section so you can see what I'm talking about. So you've got this section laid out the way we want, but now in the mobile device, it's automatically going to change to being the text, the images, the button, then more text. So there's reasons to do this that we don't need to get into right now. I just want you to see that's the kind of thing that you can be thinking about to optimize your pages for mobile so that people can maybe click on the button a little bit sooner on the page than having it buried down lower on the page for that. Okay. So that's the idea behind device-specific display. You don't need to do this for every individual section on the page, okay? You could, but you don't need to. But the reasons that you would do it are either images are coming across a little bit differently than you'd like to, especially background images for hero sections or other sections, or in the case of this feature section where I had adjusted, the heights of these individual columns. Well, within those individual columns, they become a stack. And so you might want to have a different way to emphasize using color, for example, which column is more important to you, right? So priority can come in the form of sequence, right? So we've got our top and our bottoms, et cetera. But it might just be, I want the color to be differently for the mobile, in which case we would have this version for desktop, duplicate it, set the device-specific display options to be hiding on desktop or mobile or tablet as necessary. All right, next up, we want to talk about section animations. So when you're dealing with layout, sometimes you want to make a certain section really stand out above other things. The danger of that, though, is that if you do this too much, it can be obnoxious and it can also decrease your conversions. So how can we bring your page to life without annoying your visitors? And that's where section animations can come in. So used judiciously, section animations can really do a good job of bringing the page to life, but do so in a way that doesn't aggravate your viewers. All right. So with that in mind, let's go over to the page that we were just working on, and let's talk about those section animations. All right. So within the section settings for an individual section, you have the option for animation, and it's down towards the bottom. It's like right now it's at the very bottom of these options, and you have a few different things to choose from. You can slide in a section, you can fade it in, bounce it in, pulse it in, shake. All of these, when you click on this, gives you a little bit of a preview, and whichever one you utilize or choose, you then have the option to choose from which direction does the section pop in. So let's say from the bottom, that's the bounce. And so if we have that on the hero section, we go to preview this. It's going to look a little weird at first, and I wouldn't necessarily do this bounce maneuver on the hero section, but you can see the way that it looks, right? So we click on desktop, and if we click on tablet, we can, well, you lost the effect when I went from device to device. So I'm going to go ahead and exit the preview, and I'm going to go into the preview again so you can see it. All right. So look carefully as it's happening. It's on Zoom right now, so it's going to look a little weird, but that's the pop-up. Okay. That's the way it comes in from the bottom. The effect can be a little jarring for people in the hero section. So again, use that wisely. But in another section, like perhaps the features section, you could do the animation, and maybe you want to do the fade in, and the fade in can come from no direction, so just the center, or it can come from one side or the other. So this again is about you thinking through what's the psychology of your viewer. What is going to help stand out? What will help a section of your page to stand out without annoying your viewer? Okay, so in this particular case, we do this fade in from the right. I'm going to go ahead and publish this page so that you can see it a little bit more easily as I refresh the screen on this particular section, so that you really get the feel of what the page is going to look like. All right, so we'll go ahead and open this page up, and there's the bounce up of the hero section. And then as we scroll down, that section has just faded across. Okay, and as we scroll down, nothing else is moving. And so what I want you to realize is if you did this for every single section and had one fly in and one fly in and one bounce and all that, don't do that. It is super obnoxious to do that. But if you want to do it for one or two sections on your page, especially those sections that really you want to have that additional oomph behind it, that little bit more impact, that's the way that you do it. You come into the individual section settings, come down to the bottom, and choose one of those types of animations to work with. Next up, let's talk quickly about layout adjustments with images and video. So what are some things that you should be considering when incorporating visuals? Now, I've talked a little bit about this already in regards to the widget that we utilize, the space widget, but let's talk about it a little bit more specifically. All right. So in one case, for example, you have this hero image. So when you have a hero image that takes up the full width, and it's pretty balanced. You don't necessarily have to make any necessary adjustments, okay? But let's say, for sake of discussion, we're working on an image like this, and we change the background image of this to something that's more personal for our particular brand, okay? So in my case, let's utilize this example of a coach who has this great image, but now the image that's in the background is conflicting with the image in the foreground. So there's a couple things that I want you to recognize, depending on the template that you're using. You could have an image on top like this, and it's covering up the subject of this background image. So in those cases, you might want to just eliminate the top image. But in other templates, it might be the case that you don't have two columns. You just have a one column row that's covering up the image. And you might say, well, I don't really want that to happen. So what you do is you add in a column, and this column can stretch based on the little handlebar there to be left or to the right. And you play with the interaction on desktop between the image that we're working on and the background image, okay? And you also would have the preview to look at how that image plays on mobile, right? And so we talked about this in a previous section, but if you have an image that is off balance, left or to the right, it might be the case that the image no longer has the importance of the subject in the mobile version of this, right? And so in those cases, that's when you might want to use the device-specific display to have a mobile version and a desktop version, and then play with different background images accordingly. Okay. Now, within images within a section, you also have some options. Okay. So within an image will likely take up the space of the container that it's in. So in this particular case, the row that we're working with is a 2-column row. So you can take this little handlebar and you can move it to the left or to the right, and the image is going to shrink accordingly. Alternatively, you can come into this image and you can click on the little brush icon, and you can choose to set the max image width to be a certain number of pixels. So in this case, let's say it's 300, and then that image is going to take up less space. You might also choose instead to change the max image width to be a percentage compared to the container that it's in. So since this is a 2-column row, split evenly, half and half, you could set the image to be set at, say, 50%. You can either drag that little button down, or you can type in the size of the image that you want. And you might say, that's the way that I want it. The danger of the 50% can be, or that max image width being a percentage, is that when you go to the mobile version of this same page, the container that it's in might be a little bit smaller than you want it to be. So this is where you want to either have a duplicated section for mobile versus desktop and optimize accordingly, or you might want to stick with that idea of setting a certain max image width. Instead of it being 100% of the container or 50% of the container, you set it to be something like 300. And then that allows the mobile version of this page to have an image that's a little bit more appropriately sized. Okay. So as you go through this process of playing with layout optimizations for different devices, the image size and width can be an adjustment that's easy for you to do and easy for you to pay attention to, but just something that you want to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to video, if you bring video onto a page, like let's say, for example, that we have a section on a page, let's bring in a call to action section, which is what I like to use for videos. And let's bring that in here. And instead of a CTA button, or in addition to a CTA button, you bring in a video. Okay. So you come in to bring in a video, and let's go over to YouTube for just a second and get a video from the YouTube channel for Leadpages. So recently had the opportunity to do a podcast episode with Brendan Dunn. I want to share this episode onto the website or to the landing page. I click on embed, and I take this code and I click on copy. I bring it over to the Leadpages builder, put it into the video widget. Okay. Click on save. So now I've got my video on the page, but it might be the case that that video is just larger than I want it to be. So like I showed you earlier, you can bring the space widget onto the page and put it to the left and put a space widget to the right. And then you can bring the columns left and right larger. Just do it in a balanced way so that whatever size you have on either side is symmetrical. And so that allows you to have a video that isn't going to maybe dominate the screen as much as it could if you didn't have those space widgets in place. Likewise, you could remove the space widget and add in some text to the side or have it be to the side. And that way you can control how much space that video is going to take up compared to other text that's on the page. Okay, so a few different ideas on how to incorporate images and video with space considerations to make sure that your layout is doing what you want it to do. All right, let's talk now about page backgrounds. All right, let's talk now about page background. So the idea here is that we want to consider creating a parallax effect for your layout design. This is going to be very effective. And as you may have seen, it's already in place with the template that we've been working on for this particular training today. All right, so let's come back over to the builder and show you what I'm talking about. So a parallax effect is what we call when the background is static and the front content moves over top of it. And you have that's called the parallax effect. So it has this sort of movement of one thing over the other, which is really kind of cool and done well can be very effective. So the way that you achieve that is going to the styles of your page, going to the background, and then you change the image that you want it to be. All right. So in the case of our earlier conversation, we had this new sunset kind of picture. So we put that into the background, and we can make that be different based on a few different ideas here, but we'll just keep it to fit. And image anchor can be top, center, bottom. Let's make it center for now. And so as we scroll down, we see that there's sometimes that the background is visible and sometimes it is not. All right. So that's how you create the parallax effect. Now, if you want something a little bit different, so let's bring it back to the original graphic design. And I showed this a little bit earlier, but it's good to repeat it. Let's say that you want a subtle version of that background. Okay, so we come into the section settings. Let's add in a little bit of padding on the top and bottom here for this particular section. Let's take this color and let's turn it into, say, this color green. But we're going to click on add, and we're going to make it have an opacity level of 20, which means there's a lot visible through it. Now, if that's not different enough, then we can always drag it up into the middle. So we're going for a tint basically of that parallax effect. So we've got the tan version originally. As we scroll down, we see it again, but now it's got a different color background. If you want it covered up, then of course you go into that section settings and you add in a particular color to fill it up, and then you don't see it at all. But if you want, again, to add that parallax effect with some color variation, you can do so. So now we've got our little green tint, now our tan tint, and now covered up. Okay, so you've got different options for adding some layout and design elements that bring some attention and flair to what you're trying to do, but can be done in such a way that it isn't much of a distraction. Okay, you never want your design choices to be a distraction. You always want it to help to focus on what people are really keying in on. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just bring it all together with our final section for today's training. And that is, what are some layout optimization ideas for the hero section so that you can take those best practices and pull all the pieces together that I've taught you today and have a very impactful first impression on the page. If you can do that, you can usually increase your conversions quite a bit. All right. So the idea here is that if you want to, you can, of course, use a section from a different page, copy it, paste it over, make some adjustments. But in this particular case, what I like to do is I want to showcase some of these elements that we've talked about. So in this particular case, we have a hero section of this template that looks pretty good, but maybe we want to make some changes. Maybe we don't like this particular picture. You're going to bring in your own image instead. So we could come in and manipulate all of the cool things that we want to. Let's go ahead and change the background of the page. So we're going to come into styles, click on background, choose our image. and let's choose something that is kind of cool. So in the previous session, I had an AI generated image of this volcano. So let's just use that for the sake of our discussion. So this now becomes the layout for this particular page. All right. So we've got this column on the top. And actually, let's back up. I'm going to choose a different image. All right, let's go ahead and work with this one, because I think you'll understand what I'm trying to do here for it. All right, so you've got your background image that you want, right? And obviously there's elements on the hero section that don't work with that particular background image. So we have to make some changes. So we come into layout, and we're going to go into this section for the hero. And we're going to come into this section style. And actually, I'm not in that, I'm in this hero section. There is currently a background of the section of a white stripe with a transparent top half. So I'm just going to get rid of that so that we don't see it at all. And then I need to be able to move the column that's currently over top of the subject of this image and move it to the side. So we're going to come into main content, take this column 1 and drag column 1 over to the left, which is done by bringing these dots and flipping them. Now, still too close to her, so we're going to take that little handlebar icon and we're going to shift it over. Okay, this might be enough. Then what we're going to do is we're going to see within this particular column, maybe we've got a little bit too much space with that padding and margin. So we're going to come in and we're going to reduce the margin to, let's say, 1, and the right margin, let's just balance it out. Then the top and bottom looks pretty good, but the padding might be a little bit more than what we want. So I want to bring this down to 2 each, and then the left and right margin down to 3. And then I might center this text so that I have that a little bit more balance with the rest of what's going on. And now I've got my hero section with a little bit more of a look and feel that I'm going for. I've got that vertical widget in place from an earlier part of the section. But if I didn't have that, remember, we pulled in a vertical space widget by bringing the space widget over, dropping it down, and then using this little handlebar up or down to have the exact amount of space that I want. Another quick tip that I have for you is if that's too much space, having that space widget, you can always come into the paragraph and you can add in break margin, which gives you space after the paragraph is over before the next element comes in. So playing around with that number gives you the opportunity to really fine tune how much space you want between the element you're working on and the element that's coming in next. All right. So we've got our image in place. We've got our hero section with the column balanced out with the background image for the page, as well as a clear background for the section. We've got the parallax effect, which allows us to scroll down and continue to see that background image, but with some color tones in between. And we have a page that is going through with the lead meter checks to make sure that it's excellent. So all in all, a strong page adjustment, customizing it to the look and feel that I want to have for this particular page, and ready for it to rock and roll for the business. Thank you for watching this Leadpages quick tutorial. I hope that you got a lot out of it, and more importantly, that you put it into action right away. Go ahead and do so over at leadpages.com. If you're already a customer, just log in. If you are not, start up a free trial and test it out for yourself. We'll see you in the next tutorial.